Welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. A man bought an ancient mine, but he didn't know that an alien woman was waiting for him inside. The paperwork was laughably thin for such a purchase. A single sheet with a crooked stamp and an auctioneer who seemed more interested in his lunch than the sale. The man bought the mine the way some people buy old comic books at flea markets, part impulse, part curiosity, part delusion that it might one day be worth something. The auctioneer had muttered phrases like ancient and historically significant, in the same way one might describe a rusty toaster as vintage. The man smirked, signed his name, and walked away owning several acres of dirt and an abandoned shaft in the hillside. It felt oddly satisfying, like he joined some secret club of eccentric landowners. He arrived at the mine a week later, hauling with him a backpack that sagged under the weight of bottled water, a thermos of coffee, and far too many granola bars. He wore a miner's helmet purchased online that still smelled of plastic, and the headlamp cast a jittery cone of light onto the rocks ahead. The air tasted of dust and stale minerals, like licking the inside of a battery. He wrinkled his nose but pressed on, half expecting to find nothing more than rats and graffiti. The shaft went deeper than he thought. The walls narrowed into an uneasy throat of stone, forcing him to duck and shuffle like a man who'd made a very poor real estate investment. At one point, his boot snagged on a loose rail from an ancient minecart track, and he nearly toppled face first. He cursed, then laughed at himself, muttering, "Worth every penny." The silence that followed seemed thicker than before, as though the rocks were swallowing his voice. It was when he reached the cavern that the air shifted. A faint glow pulsed ahead, too steady to be a trick of the lamp. He froze, his first thought being some sort of phosphorescent fungus, or maybe radioactive sludge, which, given his luck, would mean he'd bought a glowing death pit. But the glow moved, slowly, deliberately, as if alive. He swallowed hard and stepped closer. What stood in the cavern was not fungus or sludge, but a woman, or almost a woman. Her figure was human enough, tall, slender, draped in a garment that seemed woven from strands of shadow and silver. Her face, however, bore features too precise, too luminous, like a sculpture made of living light. And her ears, long, graceful arcs, stretching back like the sails of some alien vessel, marked her as anything but human. The man blinked twice, convinced he was hallucinating. "Okay," he said aloud, because silence felt like a bad idea. "Either I forgot to put creamer in my coffee, or I've stumbled into Comic-Con." Her eyes opened fully, twin pools of luminescence that reflected his lamp back at him. She studied him without fear, without anger, just recognition, as if she had been waiting for this moment far longer than he could imagine. "You set me free," she whispered, her voice carrying across the cavern like a song sung underwater. He pointed a finger at himself, mouth dry. "Me? No, I think you've got the wrong guy. I just bought this place. Paid less than a used car for it. The only thing I've set free so far is a very upset bat." Her lips curved into the faintest suggestion of a smile. "Your words mean little. Your presence means everything." "Great," he muttered. "I buy a fixer-upper mine, and it comes with a tenant. Do you at least pay rent?" The glow in her eyes flickered, almost like amusement. She took a step toward him, and the cavern seemed to shiver in response, tiny particles of dust rising into the air as though gravity itself bowed slightly in her wake. His instinct screamed at him to retreat, but his legs ignored the suggestion. "I have been here for longer than your kind remembers," she said, "bound by those who feared what I might become." He adjusted his helmet nervously, trying to regain some shred of control. "So, you're telling me I bought an alien prison. Good news. I think the warranty still applies. Bad news. My real estate agent is going to hear from me." This time, she laughed softly, the sound like wind passing through crystal chimes. It unsettled him even more than her silence had. "You do not fear me," she observed. "Oh, trust me, I'm terrified. I'm just covering it up with bad jokes. It's a coping mechanism." Her head tilted, long ears catching the faint light as if amplifying it. "Then you will do." "For what?" he asked, already regretting it. Her eyes glowed brighter, and for the briefest moment, the cavern walls seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. "For what comes next." The man exhaled shakily, deciding that whatever came next, he desperately hoped it involved him waking up back in his bed, with the mind safely existing as nothing more than a bad investment. But as the air thickened around him, humming with some hidden energy, he realized that option was no longer on the table. "Right," he said weakly. "Well, guess this is the part where things get weird." And in the cavern's depths, the alien woman's smile deepened. The silence between them stretched long enough for the man to realize he had forgotten how to breathe. He shifted his weight, cleared his throat, and decided that if this glowing, long-eared stranger hadn't disintegrated him yet, then small talk might keep him alive. "So," he said, his voice bouncing off the stone like a nervous echo, "you're what, a ghost? An elf? An intergalactic exchange student who missed her bus?" Her eyes narrowed, but not in anger. More like the way someone narrows their eyes when they are forced to decode a strange dialect. "I am not of your world," she replied evenly. "I was placed here when the agreement collapsed, when they chose to hide me rather than destroy me." "Right," he said, nodding as though this were the most natural revelation in the world. "That makes perfect sense. I mean, who hasn't been hidden in a cave for centuries after a galactic treaty fell apart? Happened to my uncle once. Well, not exactly the same, but he did get locked in a storage closet during Thanksgiving." For a moment, the faint glow in her eyes flickered again, and he wondered if that was her version of laughing. He took it as a win. "I must understand," she said, stepping closer. The stone under her feet seemed to hum. "Why you came here? Why now?" "Because it was cheap," he blurted. "I bought this place at an auction. 1 sheet of paper, 10 minutes. No one else wanted it. Honestly, I thought I was going to find some old tools, and maybe a raccoon or two. You were not on the brochure." Her long ears twitched ever so slightly. "You claim this was accidental?" "Oh, completely," he said. "If I'd known there was a glowing alien woman living rent-free down here, I'd have at least asked for a discount." Her expression softened, though her gaze remained sharp. "Accidents are illusions. You are here because you are meant to be here." He rubbed the back of his neck. "See, that sounds nice, but I'm just a guy with a bad sense of direction and a habit of buying dumb things online. Destiny and I don't usually hang out together. Fate swipes left on me every time." She blinked slowly, as though processing his nonsense. Then, with a voice so calm it nearly made him shiver, she said, "Then perhaps it is time fate changed its mind." He decided not to argue with someone who could probably bend the cavern into a pretzel. Instead, he fumbled for his thermos, unscrewed it, and held it out. "Coffee. It's strong enough to melt paint off walls, but hey, it keeps me going." Her gaze fell to the steaming liquid with a kind of regal suspicion. Slowly, she accepted the thermos and raised it to her lips. The first sip made her cough, a sound that reverberated like a crystal flute cracking. "This is bitter," she said. "Yeah," he agreed cheerfully. "That's how you know it's working." She studied him for another long moment before lowering the thermos. "Your world is strange." "You have no idea," he muttered. The hours blurred as they talked, or rather, as he stumbled through questions and she offered fragments of answers. Her name was unpronounceable in his tongue, filled with sounds his mouth simply refused to make. After watching him mangle it several times, she sighed and allowed him to call her Lyra. She spoke of a war fought in places he couldn't picture, battles waged across skies made of metal and seas that shimmered with light. She had been a diplomat, she said, or something close to it, a voice meant to soothe, to broker peace. When peace failed, she had become a prisoner, sealed away beneath rock by those who feared her influence more than her power. He listened, though his mind kept snagging on strange details, like how her people considered stars to be living embers rather than burning gas, or how she claimed gravity itself was once used as a weapon. His questions piled up until even she smirked at his fumbling curiosity. "You ask too much," she teased softly. "Yeah, well, if I don't ask questions, how else am I supposed to annoy you into giving me answers?" Her faint laughter startled him again, not because it was threatening, but because it was so achingly normal. For a moment, she didn't look like an alien diplomat locked away for centuries. She looked like someone who had been very, very lonely. When he finally stood to leave, she tilted her head. "You will return?" He hesitated at the cavern's mouth. "I mean, yeah. Someone's got to make sure you don't wander off and scare the locals. Besides, I still have half a pack of granola bars in my bag. You should try one. They're like crunchy despair. Delicious despair." Her eyes glowed softly as she inclined her head. "Then bring this despair to me." He grinned, though it was shaky at best, and made his way back up the shaft. His boots crunched against the rails, and his lamp flickered with each step. The further he climbed, the more unreal the encounter felt. By the time he saw daylight, he half convinced himself he had dreamed it all. But when he reached into his bag to stow the thermos, he realized it was missing. She still had it, which meant he would have to go back. And somehow, that thought didn't scare him as much as it should have. He returned the next day, carrying a duffel bag stuffed with supplies. If he was going to keep visiting an alien prisoner with glowing eyes and ears that could probably pick up satellite radio, he figured snacks were essential. He brought bottled water, a half-dozen bags of chips, 3 granola bars, and a pack of gummy bears, because he wasn't sure if aliens had a sweet tooth, but he hoped so. The cavern greeted him with the same uneasy silence as before, except this time he swore it was expectant. When he found her, sitting on a rock with the thermos balanced neatly in her hands, she looked up at him as though she'd been waiting all night. "You came back," she said. "Of course I came back. You still have my thermos, and I'm not leaving it behind. That thing cost me $15 and holds heat better than my apartment walls." She regarded him with that unervingly calm expression again, but her lips curved faintly. "You speak of objects as if they were treasures." "They are when you're broke," he replied, digging into the duffel. "Okay, lesson 1 in human cuisine. These are chips. Very thin, very crunchy, and basically terrible for you." He ripped open a bag and handed it over. She sniffed it, then gingerly plucked one out. The first bite made her eyes widen, and for a second he worried he'd accidentally poisoned her. Then she took another, crunching with such focus that it was almost ceremonial. "This," she declared solemnly, "is proof your species survived without dignity." "Yeah," he said, nodding. "We're not proud of it, but we stand by it." She ate 3 more before reluctantly setting the bag aside. "Your world is loud," she said after a moment. "Even its food speaks in noise. Wait until you try the gummy bears. They're like fruit, but if fruit were designed by a committee of insane scientists." The hour stretched again, and this time conversation flowed easier. She spoke in fragments of her people's history, though always carefully, as though each word was weighed. She described vessels that sailed not through space, but through folds of space, slipping between layers of reality like fish darting through water. She mentioned weapons that harnessed sound as force, turning vibrations into shock waves that could shatter cities. And once, with a strange softness, she described her home: skies that glowed lavender at dusk, winds that carried the scent of minerals instead of flowers. He listened, fascinated, though every so often he interrupted with jokes that earned him either silence or the faint flicker of a smile. "So, your people build gravity bombs," he said once, "and I can't even get my Wi-Fi router to work in the bedroom. You must be so proud of us." Her ears twitched. "You make light of what should terrify you." "That's my secret weapon," he said. "If I don't laugh, I'll scream. And screaming's not great for the social vibe." She studied him long enough that he began to fidget, then finally nodded as if he had passed some private test. As the days passed, his visits became routine. He'd show up with snacks and clumsy jokes. She'd offer glimpses of truths so large they made his head ache. And somehow between the two of them, the cavern felt less like a prison and more like a meeting place. But not everything was calm. On the 3rd evening, as he unpacked the gummy bears, the stone floor trembled. It was subtle at first, like the hum of distant machinery. Then it grew stronger, a low vibration that rattled the bags of chips. He froze. "Please tell me that's just a passing train." Her expression darkened. "It is not a train." "Okay, cool, not a train," he muttered, stuffing the gummy bears back into the bag. "Do I need to run? Is this a running situation?" She closed her eyes, her ears tilting slightly as if listening to something beyond human range. They are searching. Who's they? Do I want to know who they are? Those who bound me. They will feel the fracture in my prison. They will come. Fantastic, he said, throwing his hands up. I finally buy property, and now it comes with interstellar debt collectors. My real estate agent is getting such a bad review. Her gaze flicked to him, surprisingly sharp. You joke, but you must understand. If they find me, they will not stop with me. They will scour this place. Your kind will not be spared. The humor drained from his chest, leaving only the thrum of adrenaline. So what? You're saying the whole planet's on the line because I wanted to own a cheap hole in the ground? Yes, she said simply. He sat heavily on a rock, rubbing his face. I knew this mine was a mistake. I should have bought that used boat instead. Worst case, it would have just sunk. Her eyes softened as she studied him. And yet you returned. He looked up at her, startled. Well, yeah, you're down here alone. And you still had my thermos. Something in her expression shifted, almost too subtle to name. She inclined her head slightly. Then perhaps together, we may endure what comes. The tremors faded slowly, leaving silence behind. He let out a long breath and opened the gummy bears again. Right, if we're facing galactic landlords or whatever, we'd better start with sugar. Trust me, humanity does its best thinking on a sugar high. She took one gummy bear between her fingers, examined it as though it were a rare gemstone, and popped it into her mouth. Her eyes widened again. It lies. It says it is fruit, but it is not. He grinned tiredly. Welcome to Earth. He found himself going to the mine every day now. Though he tried to convince himself it was just because he was curious. Or maybe because he didn't want his duffel bag of snacks to go stale. Definitely not because he was worried about her. Absolutely not because he felt strangely better when he was down there, trading jokes with someone who could, at any moment, probably bend his skeleton into modern art. When he arrived, she was standing this time, her posture rigid, as though she had been listening again to things he couldn't hear. They are closer, she said, before he could even get his lamp adjusted. Fantastic, he said, setting down the bag with a sigh. You know, most people break in new neighbors with cookies, not cosmic threats. Do you think if I leave out a welcome mat, they'll just keep walking? Her lips curved, but it wasn't quite a smile. You cannot make light of this forever. Sure I can. I've been doing it all my life. It's called survival humor. He tossed her a pack of pretzels. Speaking of survival, you're going to want to try these. They taste like salted disappointment. She caught the bag, eyed it, and said nothing as she carefully opened it. She ate one pretzel, chewed slowly, and raised a brow. These taste as though they were once food long ago. Exactly. Perfect for stressful apocalyptic scenarios. But beneath the banter, the tension crawled in. The tremors had grown more frequent. At night, he noticed strange flickers in the sky when he left the mine, like faint rips in the atmosphere that stitched themselves back together before anyone else could see. Once, his phone refused to work at all within a mile of the shaft, buzzing with static until he stepped away. He asked her what was happening, and she explained with a calmness that made his stomach twist. The seal is undone. Their instruments, if they still watch this world, will detect the breach. They will not ignore it. Right, he said. And what exactly happens when they show up? Do they file a complaint? Send a bill? Laser beams? Please say it's not laser beams. Her silence told him it was worse. So they began planning, though planning was a generous term. He insisted they needed an escape route. She told him escape was unlikely. He argued about hiding. She countered that they would eventually search everywhere. He proposed pretending she was just a really committed performance artist, but she only stared at him until he sighed and admitted it was a bad plan. Still, he noticed she no longer spoke of being alone. Every idea she considered with him. One evening, while sharing a packet of gummy bears, she had developed a strange fondness for them. He asked, "Why me? Out of everyone who could have stumbled in here, why was it me?" Her eyes glowed faintly as she studied him. Perhaps because you were not looking for power. Perhaps because you did not expect to find me. You saw only stone. Yet you stayed when stone was not what you found. Or maybe it was destiny, he said lightly, though the word caught strangely in his chest. Lucky me. My destiny came with long ears and a bad attitude toward pretzels. This time, she actually laughed, a clear sound that startled him enough to make him drop a gummy bear. It bounced on the stone floor and rolled into the shadows, lost forever. But humor couldn't hold back what came next. On the fourth night, the ground shook hard enough to knock him to his knees. A low hum filled the air, rising in pitch until even his teeth rattled. She stood in the center of the cavern, her glow brightening, her hair lifting as though the air itself bent toward her. They are here. Right now, he shouted, clinging to a rock as dust rained down. Like, here, or just circling the block? Her expression was unreadable. Close enough. A sharp crack echoed through the shaft, followed by a ripple of light that flared across the cavern walls. It looked almost like lightning, but it didn't fade. It lingered, stretched, folded into shapes that bent the air itself. He stared at it, his mouth dry. That's not normal. That's the opposite of normal. They are opening a passage, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Well, he muttered, I guess this is the part where I regret not investing in a bunker. The light widened, pulsing, as though a door was being pushed open from the other side. He scrambled to his feet, dust coating his jacket, and looked at her. So what do we do? Fight? Run? Offer them pretzels and hope they choke? She turned toward him, and for the first time, he saw not the prisoner who had been trapped for centuries, but someone who stood tall, defiant, ready. We face them, she said. He blinked, then laughed nervously. Of course. That's exactly what I wanted to do with my life. Face ancient cosmic debt collectors in a cave. Bucket list achieved. But when the light split wide and the first shapes began to emerge, he found himself stepping closer to her anyway, clutching nothing more than his flashlight like it was a weapon. Because if the world was about to end, he figured he'd rather end it standing next to her. The doorway tore itself wide, a wound of light hanging in the cavern air. From it stepped figures tall and robed, their movements slow, deliberate, like beings who never needed to hurry. Their faces were hidden, their voices rumbling like stone dragged across stone. They spoke in a language the man didn't understand, but he didn't need a translator to know the tone. It was the sound of ownership. They weren't asking, they were demanding. He leaned toward her and whispered, So, they don't look like the friendly welcome committee type. She didn't answer, only stepped forward, her glow rising until her shadow swallowed the cavern walls. Her long ears tilted back, sharp and proud. For a moment she was brighter than the passage itself. The figure spoke again, louder, and he swore the ground trembled at the sound. She replied in a tongue he couldn't follow, but her voice rang like a blade being drawn, the robe being stiffened. They want me returned, she translated calmly, though her eyes never left them. Yeah, well, tough luck, he muttered. We don't do refunds around here. All sales are final. One of the beings raised a hand. The air cracked like thunder, and the mine's walls shuddered, pebbles raining down. He flinched. Okay, maybe partial refunds? She glanced back at him. You need not stay. Right, he said, gripping his flashlight tighter. Just walk away while interdimensional stone people blast you to dust. Yeah, no thanks. Besides, you still have my thermos. Her glow flickered with something dangerously close to warmth. Then she turned back to them, her voice rising, fierce and unyielding. The cavern shook again, this time harder. The robed figures advanced, their steps slow but heavy, as though each one bent gravity itself. The man's knees buckled, but he forced himself upright. Okay, listen up, he shouted, surprising even himself. His voice cracked, but he pushed on. You've had her locked up long enough. She's free now. And, if you want her back, you'll have to go through me. The figures stopped. For a heartbeat, silence ruled the cavern. Then the air itself seemed to ripple, pressing down on him, testing him. He stood his ground, sweating, shaking, but not moving. And then something impossible happened. The light of the passage wavered. The pressure cracked. One of the robed beings staggered back. She gasped softly. They cannot hold their binding if you stand beside me. Really? He croaked. Well, good to know bravery doubles as bug repellent. Her eyes burned brighter now. Together, then. Yeah, he said, his laugh shaky but real. Together. She raised her hands, and the cavern erupted with light. It wasn't heat or fire. It was resonance, a vibration that sang through the stone, through him, through everything. The robed figures recoiled, their forms unraveling like smoke caught in wind. The doorway shrank, folding back into itself with a scream of energy. When the last of them vanished, silence fell so deep it hurt his ears. Dust settled slowly. The mine groaned, a final shudder running through its walls. Then the passage sealed itself with a roar, leaving nothing but cracked stone and stale air. He coughed, brushing grit off his jacket. Well, he wheezed. That was fun. 10 out of 10. Would not recommend. She turned to him, her glow dimmer now, but her eyes steady. You did not run. He shrugged, trying to play it off, though his legs still shook. Guess I've gotten attached. Besides, someone's got to keep you supplied with potato chips. Her laugh was soft, tired, but genuine. She stepped closer, studying him with something almost like wonder. You changed my fate. And you, he said, changed my definition of a bad investment. The mine rumbled again, and a large crack split across the cavern roof. He glanced up. Okay, time to leave before our grand victory ends with us flattened into pancakes. They scrambled up the shaft together, dust chasing them, until at last the daylight hit their faces. He stumbled out onto the hillside, breathing in air that had never felt so clean. She followed, blinking at the open sky as though it were the rarest treasure. She stood there for a long time, staring at the horizon. The world was hers now, no longer a prison, no longer hidden. He watched her, realizing that she wasn't just free from them. She was free to choose. So, he said finally, breaking the silence. What now? You planning to conquer the world? Because if so, I should warn you. Humans get very defensive about their coffee shops. Her ears tilted back as she turned to him. No, I do not wish to rule. I wish to walk it, to know it, with you. He blinked, caught off guard, then grinned. Well, lucky for you, I make a great tour guide. Terrible sense of direction, but great jokes. She smiled, the glow in her eyes softer than he had ever seen it. The mine behind them gave one last echoing groan before collapsing inward, sealing forever. The past was buried. The future stretched wide. He looked at her, at the long ears catching sunlight, at the faint shimmer still clinging to her skin. He had bought a forgotten hole in the ground, but what he had really found was something he'd never known he was missing. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The end.